So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Donna Murphy. I'm one of the co-leaders of the Braver Angels Film Club, and joining me today are other co-leaders, Ivan Kason, Molly Zeff, and Stephanie Zamora. And we are thrilled to have with us today Phyllis Rodriguez, who appeared quite prominently in the documentary that you watched, In Our Son's Name. And this is what I asked Phyllis to give us some biographical information, and this is what she shared. First of all, on Orlando, Orlando Rodriguez immigrated to New York from Cuba in 1955 with his parents at age 13. He was a professor of sociology, criminology at Fordham University in the Bronx. His background included social research in the areas of criminology and mental health. Helped a series of courses at Fordham, including terrorism and society, global conflict, war and religion, and harm and justice, crime and punishment. In 2011, as part of Rising Hope, a college level certificate program, he developed and began teaching in prisons a course called Sociology and Religion. And as for Braver Angels, he was a national organizer. He helped to organize some of the workshops that we offered nationwide. Phyllis Rodriguez is a native New York in the Bronx. She is a teacher, artist, and community activist. Her lifelong commitment to nonviolence and reconciliation has deepened since 2001. She's involved in issues of restorative justice, undoing racism, the elimination of the death penalty, banning torture, and the unconstitutional hearings in the case of Mohammed et al. Versus in the ongoing military tribunals at Guantanamo. The story of her meeting with Aisha Al-Wafi, Zakariya Sawi, the only person tried in federal in relation to the attacks, is chronicled by the Forgiveness Project, a London-based organization that promotes non-vengeful responses to violence. So welcome everybody, and especially welcome to Phyllis. Thank you so much for being with us today. And so, Phyllis, we're going to start with you. We're going to be the film club co-leaders are going to ask you some questions for a while. Okay, and so that's where we're going to start. And I guess I'm up for the first question, Phyllis, which is the film with Aisha Wafi. And tell us about your decision to have a relationship with Aisha and how it affected you.
I know what you're asking, but it really your voice. I don't know if it's just me, but you broke up. But you want to know how I came to have a relationship with her?
And how it impacted you.
Oh, how it impacted me. Yeah. Well, when her son was indicted, she was in the press a lot, and here, and she came here to meet with the lawyers and to meet with her son. And she came pretty often, and there was particularly a profile of her in the New York Times Sunday magazine one week. I guess it was 2002. And I read about her and I looked at her and I said, she's a victim too. She's her. I felt for her. I felt we have that if she's willing, I would like to tell her that in my eyes, her son is not a monster, and she's not a monster. And I don't know if I'm making myself completely clear, but I was involved with, also still am, with a group of people called September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. And several of us met with her in November because she was interested also in meeting some of us. And she told us something about her son and about her life. And she also said, first of all, I want to apologize to you for what's happened to your families. And she said she didn't know if her son was guilty or innocent. She thinks he was innocent, but she wouldn't swear to it. He's a troubled man. And it really then we all went, there were about 6 of us, we went around the table and we told her that we apologize for what we thought might not be a fair trial for her son and for what she's been going through, being the mother of someone who's vilified. You know, he was all over the place, and he was actually convicted by media, which a lot of people are, you know, very prejudicial. And then, and she speaks French and Arabic, and she had been accompanied by a an interpreter, French woman, working for an organization in France that works against the death penalty in this country. And they were sponsoring her with, from that grew, I wasn't the only one, but I was the one that kept in closer touch. And I was the only one who was a mother like her. But we did keep in touch. And when she came to the US for meetings or any business that she had to take care of connected with Zacharias, we would meet. You know, I'd meet her in Washington and sometimes bring her to White Plains, to New York. We had a bond. We had a bond because we both felt that it was hell for the mothers, you know, that my son was gone.
Yeah.
He wasn't suffering, but her son was there, and she's watching him and feels helpless. And, you know, just an aside, a couple of people have said to me, especially after the movie, what do you think she did that had made her son turn out like that? And I said, what do you mean? I said, did you have control over your children? You know, did I have control over no one has complete control over their children. And we don't know all the things that influence them.
Yeah.
But, you know, this tendency to blame the mother. So that was a very basic part of my wanting to meet her.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Phyllis. And Ivan, you've got the next question.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. And Phyllis, thanks again from me for being here. I think that's very courageous of you to come here and join our discussion. My question is, how much did your initial reaction to meeting Aisha depend on her reaching out to you beforehand? Because to me, it could have gone either way.
That's true. That's true. Well, it was actually brokered by somebody who was very active. There was a group called Murder Victims for Reconciliation. That's an anti-death penalty group. And he had connections with the French group and with National. So it was as if we had the ideas separately, but then we came together. Yeah, I mean, that's the short answer. But we were all, those of us here in the States, we were very nervous before meeting her. I mean, we had no idea if she would be angry, you know, or what state she'd be in. But as I said, she was you know, we went around a table, which always loosens up a group, you know, creates a bond in a group. She went first and she said, I want to apologize for what happened to your family member. I mean, you can't beat that for an icebreaker. Does that answer your question, Ivan?
Ivan, are you there? I think Ivan might be frozen.
Yeah, he looks frozen.
Oh.
Okay, so let's move on to Molly. You've got the next question.
Basically, I'm curious to hear how replicable what you did would be for just anyone. And actually, this came partly out of you calling yourselves ordinary women, which I got a kick out of. So the question I have is, can the way you related to Aisha be taught to others? You know, if it's not an inherent trait to take that kind of bridge building in stride and just do it so easily as you made it look, can that mannerism be taught to others?
I believe it can, and I believe by example too. And you know, it wasn't easy. You know, we didn't have that much in common. We had this and our concerns, but I believe it can be, and that's, well, let's put it this way: in our culture, you're supposed to get angry and want the worst possible thing. Whoops, there, there you are. Ivan, were you satisfied with my answer?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, my network got all scrambled up too.
Yeah, yeah.
But thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go. I'm trying to get my. Okay. Where was I? Oh yes. You know, we live in a very vengeful country climate, and the expected thing is that if someone's murdered, someone close to is murdered or has a terrible thing happen to them, you're going to be angry and you're going to want to, you know, strike back. And that's a considered justice, you know, punishing the other. So it does attract attention when people don't react that way. And before 2001, I was always fascinated by those stories, or, you know, like with the murder victims' parents sitting with the perpetrator's parents in the courtroom, or appearing together and not being like this, you know. Because the truth is, you know, people talk about closure. There's no such thing as closure. And hurting someone else doesn't, you might get a momentary feeling of exaltation, but then it fades and you're still left with the loss that you suffered. So I hope the tide is turning in our country. And, you know, as Aisha was taken under the wing by this French organization, it's interesting, you know, that in Europe and many, many countries, they don't believe in the death penalty. It's not a punishment, not an option. And they see our system as a violation of human rights, people's human rights. So I think it can be taught. I think, I don't know how exactly. You know, I don't know. Yeah, Molly.
Oh, I'll go ahead and finish. I'll share in a moment.
No, I think it should be taught, actually.
I was going to say there are actually people who teach this kind of thing. I was curious about your personal opinion, obviously, but who teach relating to people who have harmed you or you think you've harmed you, for sure, even professionally. So
Yeah.
I was curious to hear your personal thoughts, because it seems like there's got to be some level of innate trait and some level of teaching involved to overcome, you know, the internal needs that you're describing. For time's sake, though, I'm going to thank you and turn it back to Donna.
Let me just comment one short comment.
Sure.
Many states have restorative justice, practice restorative justice, which is a whole other topic, but it's a way of helping people to understand each other, you know. And then there are other things involved, but it's definitely a counter to the vengeful responses.
Yeah, I'll put out there one version is for people who don't know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. If you haven't heard of these before, I'm just going to put them in the chat. And I know Rwanda, South Africa, and even Dallas, Texas, and a few other US cities have used a version of these. So,
Yes.
anyway, now I'm going to turn it over to Donna. Thank you for flagging.
Okay.
Super important.
Thank you. Phyllis, in the movie, it shows that you and Orlando went to Sing Sing prison. Can you share with us what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, I would say over in my life, that and getting to know Aisha were two major influences on me, really, really affected me and changed me. Um, uh, Again, we were nervous. We didn't know what it would be like. But the same thing, if people go around in the circle and tell their stories, and these were guys who had done a lot of, they were long-termers. And long-termers, there's a culture in a lot of the prisons, the maximum security prisons mainly, that everyone says they didn't do it, they're innocent. And there are people who didn't do it who are in prison. But there comes a point, I've been told, like maybe 10 years into it, or maybe less, maybe more, where they say, wait a minute, I don't want to go, when I'm released, do I want to go out and live the same life and have the consequence be coming back to prison? Wait a minute, you know what? I did it. I did something that was wrong. And that is a stepping stone to looking within and changing. And in many prisons, not enough, there are programs that once a prisoner, male or female, gets to that point where they want to learn more about this, there are communities of people, of prisoners within, who have been through some of this nonviolent training and alternatives to violence, which is an old program started by Quakers 30 or 40 years ago in prisons. And then there are education programs like where Orlando taught. Once you get on that path, you have options for things. But hearing the stories of these 5 men, I'd say with 3 of them described abuse as children, parental abuse, parental neglect, and they didn't have the grounding or the, one guy told us that his father used to, like, what cockfights are, with roosters fighting and people sit around and they bet. His father used to put him in a circle with another kid, and his friends would sit around and they would bet on who's going to win. I mean, there's such cruelty that goes on that we're not aware of. And then someone acts out, and it's a product of what they went through, and it could be generational too. So coming to that point where you say, wait a minute, I'm lying. I did that. So what am I going to do about it? That is a major breakthrough for people in prison. And it's something that should be offered more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, your point about people experiencing trauma as children and then going to act out as adults is an excellent one. Stephanie, over to you.
Hi, Phyllis. Nice to meet you.
Hi, likewise.
I'm going to put this in the chat. And so the question is, what do you think keeps people from tapping into their empathy and humanity?
Alienation.
Well, and you're just kind of talking about, the people that had been abused, and if that's their only.
Right. That's all they know about. Yeah. But also, I think that we have an empathy crisis in our country, in our culture. And I think that we're more and more alienated from each other, tuned into something, walking on the street or talking to someone on a phone who's 10,000 miles away and not noticing the people on the sidewalk or waiting for the light with them to say hello. You know, we're very cut off from community. We have to work at it to have, you know, to create our own community. And I think examples are the best way. I mean, examples, but also teaching. I think that can be taught, just like nonviolence, you know. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just, from your experience, just because, I mean, even since then, we have a real crisis in empathy and humanity right now, it's not getting better. And so, I mean, I'm on the side of hope, but, it's hard to keep that hope going sometimes.
Yeah, well, we have to,
Yep,
you know,
absolutely.
we have to. Yeah,
Okay, well, thank you very much.
thank you.
And Molly, I'll leave it to you if you want to ask your last question or if you want to have the audience members ask questions at this point. Molly, up to you.
It's actually Ivan who's up right now, and that's up to Ivan. So I'll leave it.
Oh, I'm
for him.
sorry.
It's okay.
Oh,
I can't tell an I and a K from M and a Z, apparently. Okay.
okay. Well, I have the official last question, but you might have answered it already, Phyllis. The question was, again, about your reaction meeting with Aisha. How much of it was instinctive and natural versus being intentional and very a conscious type of behavior?
It was mostly instinctive. I have been criticized. I've been criticized by people close to me, especially my children, and even sometimes Orlando, from like wanting to go to too many people and help them. You know, like feeling for someone and wanting to stop what I'm doing, and I was compared to this character in Saturday Night Live who was called Yorgi. And he was always trying to help people across the street who didn't want to go, you know, and things like that. But yes, it was instinctive. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's just it befuddles me when I see people do extraordinary things. Where does it come from? And more times than not, it is instinctive, and
Yeah.
that makes it even more extraordinary.
Well, it doesn't seem extraordinary to me. I mean, it seems like it should be. But also, I grew up in New York City and the Bronx, particularly. And I don't know if it's the same now, but New York City people, like my father was like this. You talk to everybody, you know. You passing someone who's coming this way and that way. Oh, hey, guy, nice day, or oh, I like your hat, or you know. So,
Wow.
so I'm very comfortable talking to strangers.
Yeah, but it's still extraordinary to me. I'll turn it over to Molly, and I think we're opening it up to the general audience.
Okay.
Yeah, and because I forgot to say it at the beginning, remember to raise your electronic hand if you want to ask a question. And also, please keep anything that you have to say to 2 minutes or less. Okay, Molly, go ahead.
All right, welcome everybody. So we're gonna start with a usual general big question. Just want to know, what did you think of the film more broadly, and what were some of your main takeaways from it? And use the hand raising feature at the bottom as a reminder. And if you're not sure how to do that because it's your first time, just reach out to me and I can on chat, right in the chat, and I can tell you how to do it. But there should be a raise hand symbol right at the bottom there. Yeah, go for it, Bill, and then Mary.
Could you please clarify, are we supposed to be asking you a question, or are we supposed to be answering the question that you just asked?
You're just answering a question.
Okay, the question is, what did you think of the film?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, I thought the film was great. The one thing that kind of struck me, though, was out of all of the parents who were affected, there's only one person who bubbled up to the surface and showed up in a documentary like this. Why isn't Phyllis in a group of Americans who also felt the same way and did the same thing? Why is Phyllis and her husband unique? So that's the question that the film made me ask, and I still don't know the answer.
And if I talk too long to that, tell me, interrupt me.
No, you're good.
There are others, but we are in the whole, there are others of like mind. And in February of 2002, we formed a group called September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. We're anti-war and pro-nonviolence and also human rights and stuff like this. But I'm not the only one who stood up, but people have their reasons for not doing it. Even in, there was a lot of fear then. You have to, if you lived through it, particularly in New York, in the Northeast, there was a lot of fear because there was a lot of pressure to be patriotic, And if you weren't patriotic, you were a terrorist lover. So, for example, there was one woman, but she had children. She didn't want to, be so public. She didn't want to be in any publicity because she didn't want her children to have problems as a result of that. The climate was terrible. I was not welcomed with open arms in most places once people knew my feelings about my opinions about the death penalty and about military reprisals to the attacks. So, our group has about under 200 members. We're still together. And we work on a couple of different issues. But, there were thousands and thousands of victims' family members. And the majority of them, some may sympathize with us, but just not want to be associated with that. But most don't, most don't.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go for it, Mary.
Okay. It's so lovely to meet you, Phyllis. I'm Mary, and I used to meet every Tuesday afternoon on Zoom with Orlando and the rest of the core Brave Angels.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Yeah, organizing group. Yeah. I think you might have passed in the background there a couple of times. So yeah, we miss him so much, and we're so sorry that he's not here for
Thank
you
you.
and for everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, knowing him and working with him, it was particularly moving, the movie. But I was a little confused about a couple of things. I wonder if you can enlighten us. I wasn't quite sure who the children were, and that appeared. There's a boy and a girl that appeared from time to time in the movie.
Oh, they weren't identified. Oh, yes, our grandchildren.
Oh, grandchildren.
Yeah, 2 out of 3 of our grandchildren. Yeah.
Okay, and so that was my next question. I wasn't sure if Greg was an only child or if he had siblings or
No, his sister, he had an older sister.
an older sister. So that's it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's good to know a little bit more about him as well. I never knew anything about this when he was with us. He never mentioned it. He just worked on his Brave Angels organizing, and I will tell you, I really enjoyed his dry sense of humor.
Oh, not everybody gets it, so I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It takes a while sometimes.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, we both of us, we didn't want to identify ourselves, have a sign, victim's mother, victim's father, because then, and also once you mention 9/11, people look at you differently. So there are a lot of, you don't want that to get in the way of what you're working on.
Yes.
And even casual relationships, I never bring it up. And we both belong to this, I still do, to a fitness center. And we just, you know, it's got to be separate. Otherwise, you can't live a normal life.
Yes,
Yeah,
I get it. Thank you so much, Phyllis.
you're
Much
welcome.
appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, since we didn't have a ton of reactions to the overall questions above about the film itself, I'm just going to move on to the second question, which is how does the bridge building work? How does the bridge building work between the two women in the film relate to the bridge building work we do in Braver Angels? So we're trying to just kind of set up before we get into some of the deeper questions here. Well, they're all pretty deep, but basically we're trying to get into a little more of what takeaways we have, since a lot of us are already, you know, deep in the throes of different kinds of bridge building bipartisan work. So go for it. It's in the chat as well, and take a moment to think if you need it.
That's for me or for others?
No. This is the part of this is the hour when we all discuss things all together.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great.
We usually spend a full hour and a half just discussing a film, but since you were here, we spent the first, 25 minutes or half hour talking to you. So
Oh, okay.
this is the
I'm
part
going
for
to put
everybody.
myself on mute.
Sounds good. All right. So is it relevant? Does it relate? I mean, obviously we chose it for a reason. Yeah, go for it, Patty.
Oh,
Flash on and flash right off, but go for it.
sorry. I was on the fence. So now it seems to me just having curiosity about what someone on the other side, what their experiences are, this is taking that to such an extreme that it's important to understand the trauma on both sides. So a perpetrator understanding that is also traumatic, and being curious, or sides of war as aggression. I think where the difficulty really seems to lie, at least for me, is having a sense of curiosity about the trauma on the quote unquote other side without being accused of, oh, you're making excuses, or, oh, it's somehow we're not allowed to hold the dichotomies of my own trauma and their trauma together, if that makes any sense. I don't know, Phyllis, you might want to say something about how you do that, or how people respond to you. Basically saying you're having sympathy for these evil doers,
Yeah.
and you can understand the trauma you've experienced and their trauma. It just seems that other people don't tend to get that you can hold both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a very simple response to that, because I imagine that we all lived in a small village and we all knew each other, and the same thing happened. We would have community support, and also we would know each other. We wouldn't be just monolithic figures, So I think it's about relationships and alienation.
Thanks.
Go for it, Bill.
So you're asking about the relationship between Braver Angels and what we saw in the documentary. And I think they're very, very similar in the sense that we're trying to extend a hand to each other. The one difference, though, was in the documentary, the Alternatives to Violence program at Sing Sing. In Sing Sing, it's not really like, people are trying to extend a hand of understanding to each other. You've got a circle of men, and they're having a therapy session, but they're not really extending their hand to you to understand you, or you extending a hand to them to understand them, like a Republican and a Democrat would extend their hands to each other, or a mother from one side would extend their hand to a mother from the other side. I thought the Alternatives to Violence program was sort of on a different plane or level or theme than your relationship with Isha. Would you say that's true?
I guess I better stay unmuted. Well, AVP, what happened here? What AVP tries to do is to rewire the automatic responses that, you know, if you've grown up in a violent atmosphere, violent environment, your reaction to things is anger, and you may not even, you don't think about it, right? You're impulsive, and that could be part of what got you in trouble. So the idea is it is kind of like therapy, I guess. I mean, I took the training, the two of us took the training, and we did participate, and not in the prison, but in a couple of groups in the community. I think with the people, most of the people who go through AVP, what happens is an awareness opens up when they can see that what their knee-jerk reactions to things can do to others, and what it does and what it's doing to them. I think that empathy can come from that. The guys who we met with at Sing Sing had never before met with any murder victims' family members or parents. And they were impressed that we were willing to meet with them. And we were impressed that they were willing to open up and be vulnerable with us. You know, so I think AVP is a very good program. You know, nothing's perfect, but
Yeah, I mean, so in a sense, it is like Braver Angels, because you know, you are trying to cross the divide.
you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Mm.
We're gonna go to Liz and Kaya and then close out this question and move on. So Liz, go for it.
So I was just seeing a lot of parallels to the work we do in the Depolarizing Within workshops, in that we are trying to help people feel brave enough and give them the skills to be willing to cross the divide, seek understanding with people who disagree with them, at the potential cost of ostracism by the people on their own team. And hope that that happens less and less as many more of everyone gets depolarized. But that was another parallel to the Braver Angels work that I was seeing.
Thank you. And Kaya?
I actually have a question to Phyllis. Are you referring with empathy to the mother or to Musawi? For whom do you have empathy? I like to understand.
I have empathy for the mother and sympathy for the son.
Sympathy for... I give up.
Why? Okay.
Let me start by saying that I have difficulty speaking because I really have the deepest empathy, sympathy, and every profound feeling you can imagine for parents who have lost their children. And therefore, and unfortunately, I have experienced.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So I know that parents react in different ways to their losses. And there's no way can I allow myself to judge. Having said that, I don't understand, I fully understand the empathy for the mother of Musawi, because she is also a victim like you, really. But to have the sympathy for this horrible human being and not to allow yourself to realize that there are evil people.
Mhm.
It's just very difficult for me.
Yeah, I understand. No, I understand. And he from my observation and what I know about him, I don't think he's an evil person. I think he has emotional problems, deep emotional problems. But also, just to correct the record, and it was never made clear, he was not convicted. He decided to plead guilty. He was not convicted, and it's not clear that he knew anything about it because he was in detention in Minnesota, waiting for a hearing to be deported because he was exhibiting bizarre behavior, learning to fly at a flying school in Minnesota. And he had this really bizarre, it drew attention of the instructor, who called the FBI in Minnesota, and that the head then, a woman whose name I don't remember, right away wanted to get the right to interrogate him and to see what he had in his apartment and whatever, that kind of thing, and to bring him in. And the FBI, the CIA, the whatever else, they just brushed her off. He was in detention from around August 10th or so. Before that, he didn't know any of these guys. He was convenient. He was a convenient someone. I mean, he had plans. I mean, he wanted to fly a plane into the White House. That was his plan. And that's why he was here, to learn to fly. But he worked alone, and the hijackers worked in pairs. And they work in pairs because if one starts to weaken, the other will say, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. We're together, what else can I say? He also had a childhood with violence. I mean, I'm just going to say one word about Aisha. When I heard her life story, I never met anyone who was forced into a marriage with an abusive man at age 14. That's all I'm going to say. In Morocco. And he was criminally insane. He was later put in a mental hospital for criminally insane. But what she went through and what she overcame and made a life for her children the best she could was because her husband then he couldn't get work in Morocco, so they went to France, and she said she saw French women and that they had independence. They were independent, they were confident, they could work. And it changed her way of thinking. It made her think, oh yeah, I can get rid of him. I can do without him. But what the atmosphere that her children grew up in was very, very harmful. But I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry, Haya, about losing a child. A few things that are worse, right?
We're going to close out this question. I just wanted to also mention a couple of things that weren't said. So the question again was about how this parallels with our work in Braver Angels. And I think a lot of it, just to paraphrase what someone said earlier, was to do with walking into conversations without making assumptions about someone's beliefs, you know, politics, where they came from, background, etc. I think that's an important one. I think people often realize there are more gray areas in everyone's views than most people's views, if they do make assumptions. And also kind of walking in with the best intentions, and like that, like with the assumption that someone does have the best intentions in mind, is a way to approach it. And love and empathy. I noticed, Phyllis, you and the other mother, were very much approaching each other with love and empathy and letting each other be humans first, and not, you know, letting other identities override that humanity. So I'm going to now pass it on to the next
Okay, I got it.
questionnaire.
Yeah, and I think,
which is
yeah. Yeah, so I think we've been kind of talking about this, and you know, I'd love to get everybody else's opinion here. I know Ivan has weighed in, and then just hearing Phyllis talk about Aisha. The question is, so Phyllis says, Aisha and I are just two ordinary women. Do you, and I'm asking the group, do you agree that they are just two ordinary women? Haya, your hand, okay, Haya's hand is not raised. Yeah. Okay, yeah, Bill, go ahead.
So the answer is yes and no. They're ordinary in the sense that they're doing what every major religion in the world teaches us to do. I don't care which religion you're talking about. All religions teach us to do this. And if you've been exposed to Quakers, I know that you know what I'm talking about. On the other hand, they're not ordinary because of some of the things that we've already talked about during this session, about many who are not willing to band together, many who are not willing to go public, many who are afraid of retribution. So they are unusual in the sense that they are willing to stick their heads up. So I think the answer is yes and no.
Thanks, Bill. Bonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think they are not ordinary, or they are ordinary in the sense that anyone can do this. We can learn to do these things. There's been talk of training and how to learn some of these, I don't know, intentions. I don't know, however you want to phrase that. But I think they may seem to be extraordinary at this point because it's, like Phyllis has said, it's not part of our culture. So there aren't very many people who, as Bill was saying, haven't had the courage to stick their heads out and do this work. But I think everyone has the potential for it. So.
Yeah, everybody has the capability, and there's lots of people, for whatever reasons, can, you know, some people just can't. They're hanging on by their fingernails as it is, but we definitely appreciate everyone who does stick their head out, right? Lori, go ahead.
I would say maybe Phyllis, at some point you were an ordinary woman, but you answered a call and stepped up and turned into something extraordinary. Your response, it's just amazing. This whole story is really really amazing. And there aren't a lot of people who would react in this way, and it's really inspirational. But I think being prepared to answer the call in the moment is what makes you really extraordinary. Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. There were extraordinary circumstances, you know, and I was so angry at George W. Bush. That's where my anger went, you know, and I was just compelled to do things that, you know, that challenged these assumptions that we talked about. So, and I'm fortunate that I had the fortitude, and also Orlando. We, you know, a lot of times when there are tragic situations, relationships don't last. But we were very lucky because for the most part, we were in agreement about what was important. and what to back each other up on. So, I feel very lucky in a lot of ways.
I just want to say, I think that is also extraordinary. I mean, there were years and years of work in your relationship as individuals that helped prepare you for this. And I'm just really grateful. Thank you. Thank you for all your work for your over so many years to build this story.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Okay, I'm gonna put the next question in here. We've also been kind of going around this, but want to put it out there. At what level are parents responsible for the actions of their children? And we've kind of gone around this. Obviously, there's some generational things that go on here, and then some situational things. There's just parts of the world that are very difficult to, be unlucky enough to be born into. But would love to hear everybody's comments on, are parents responsible for the actions of their children? Bill?
Well, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. And we recently had a situation here in the United States where this boy got a hold of a gun and went off and killed a whole bunch of kids. And so they put the mother on trial and said, you were responsible for that because you let him have the gun and you didn't take care of him. And she was found guilty. And now the father is on trial for the same thing. So there's legal precedent for the fact that at least in one case, a parent was responsible for the child. However, I mean, that's one case. There's so many subtleties here about parental responsibility. There's nature and there's nurture. It's a very, very complicated brew. But at least in one legal case, there's precedent for the fact that the parent was responsible.
Yeah, and I think almost all parents always want to do the best they can. But again, circumstances can go and take both the parents and the children in very different directions, right?
Well, I wouldn't say all parents, because we just heard about Isha's husband.
No, that's why I said by and large, I think most parents want to be, the best parents they can be. Not all. Yeah, Lori.
I think though too, I mean, Aisha's husband has a story too. We're all born as babies without any of this baggage, and there's experiences in life that happen to us that shape us. It could just be something so small, but it heads us, it heads our trajectory in a totally different way. And we just don't know, we just don't know what's happened in somebody's life, and what has led to this moment. But I think, parents have responsibilities, and that's different and changes over time. But there is some responsibility there that needs to happen. But again, we talk about generational trauma and how that's passed down over and over and over. And unless somebody's willing to break that cycle, that it just builds and it builds and it builds in somebody. And there's studies that show that you can inherit trauma even. And so building over generations and generations and generations, I think most of the time these things are a cry for help.
For sure. Yeah. Nobody else on that topic? Okay, Ivan, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. This is for everybody except for Phyllis. How would you have reacted in meeting Aisha? Anybody want to touch that one? Randy. Are you Randy?
Yes,
Randy
I'm
Freeman?
Randy.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Phyllis. This isn't for you, though. It's such a hard one because she's the mother, And I think I would connect to a mother's pain because in a very real way, she lost her son as well. As she said, he was in a dungeon, he's in prison and she'll never be able to hug him again. And that's a huge loss. And I think that and it's not something she asked for. And I don't think we're in charge of what our children, we're not in charge of what our children do. My children are not me. So it doesn't mean I wouldn't have been angry at the whole situation. I don't know. I would have struggled more than you, Phyllis, with, wanting, I don't know. I don't know what I would have wanted. I don't know. It must have been just so difficult, but I think I could have related to the mother and to the pain that a mother feels at a loss. But that's it. I don't know how I would have felt about her son. I don't know if I could have been maybe if I had known and understood what you understood and what a horrible childhood he had, I would have understood his, I guess, mental illness in a way, and I would have been more forgiving. So.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Bill, you want another swing at it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on how much homework you do before the meeting. You know what you're getting yourself into. I got the impression that Phyllis and Aisha knew about each other before they met. So they knew that they were, if you will, like-minded. So I think I probably would have felt, compatible with the mother, because like they say in business, this is not personal. My son is one step removed from me. Your son is one step removed from you. I didn't do anything. Your son didn't do anything. In fact, my son wasn't even a participant. He was just at work in a building. So there's a great deal of degrees of separation between what happened. So I don't think I would have taken anything personally. What I would have taken personally is probably the opposite, which is, Aisha, you and I are locked arms against the world. I mean, we have a whole bunch of people who hate us for being friends. And I think we have more camaraderie by virtue of the fact that these guys out there hate us both. So, I think it would have been more bonding than anything else.
That's a very interesting point, Bill. Anybody else?
I'm just coming
If
off of
not,
mute. Oh, I came off of mute. I forgot to raise my hand.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This might just be a tangent, but when you were saying that, Bill, it really struck a chord with me and made me think of a lot of people don't have the courage to do the unfavorable or unorthodox thing in a time of heightened crisis like that. So it really resonated with me what you said. And I think it took a lot of courage, Felice, to set a new precedence and stick to your guns, even though you might have lost a lot of people on your side in that time.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. If nobody else, I will pass it on to Donna.
Excuse me,
wants to say something.
I was looking for the symbol for raising your hand and I couldn't find it.
Go ahead,
I just
Phyllis.
want to say that I had really nothing to lose. I didn't have a job that I was endangering. Orlando's job was not in danger as an academic. I mean, yeah. My kids were grown. So I think there are a lot of factors that can make you feel more confident about, going against the grain.
All right. Thank you for that. And I will turn it over to Donna.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. So this is another question for everybody except Phyllis. And that is, have any of you decided to forgive someone for a grievous offense? And what did the path to forgiveness look like for you? And perhaps grievous offense might be a little strong, but you feel like someone committed an offense against you. Did you forgive them And what did that path to forgiveness look like for you? So nobody's ever forgiven anybody, huh? I don't believe that. Haya, go ahead. Unmute, please.
My mother used to say that the feature she likes about me the most is my ability to forgive very quickly. You know, we would have a fight, and I don't know, after 5 minutes, I was back to myself. So I have to say that I really do not relate much to anger. In other words, to that feeling of desire to avenge myself or to carry on, you know, hatred, or, you know, I really don't relate to it. However, so you don't think I'm an angel, because I'm not. I'm very judgmental, and if, in a very intellectual type way, I feel the need to separate good from bad. Now, if you told me that you are working on a program whereby you're going to change these horrible people, because in my opinion, they're horrible. These terrorists, I don't care about their background. I don't see it as an excuse. And I find it odd that anybody would even consider it as an excuse. I don't care what father he had. There's no excuse to what he has done to so many people, and to feel sorry for him vis-a-vis the 3,000 who got killed on that day. I don't see it. So it's not a desire to avenge myself, but a desire to find some sense of justice and logic, you know. And as I said, as far as mothers are concerned, they can do no wrong in my eyes. I was always my mother's baby, you know, to a dying day. I loved her dearly, and I really have tremendous amount of sympathy and empathy for mothers. So if that what makes Phyllis feel good, fine. But honestly, I can't relate to it, because I just don't understand why the sympathy should go for this guy vis-a-vis the victim.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if she's saying that it should be one or the other, right? That she can have sympathy for both. And it's very, very difficult. It's a really difficult concept. I understand. Yvonne, you're up next.
Thank you. So what struck me, and it was the concept of forgiveness in that story, because I understand what Haya's just saying, but I don't think I'm judgmental. I can, on a level of day-to-day things, I don't let things bother me, and so I don't need to forgive people. And so I feel that I can consider someone who's considered bad and wonder what their reason is, what the story was. I don't know if I go as far as describe it as sympathy, but I mean, I have a person in my life, in my lifetime, who hasn't done anything egregious to me, but there's a history that I cannot forgive. And during the documentary, that's what I was struck by, that I could see that this forgiveness gave Phyllis and Orlando a huge amount of comfort. And I'm kind of jealous because I understand that that is a thing, like that forgiveness does that to people. But when I was in my head, I was imagining forgiving this person for all the little teeny tiny slights that really don't mean a lot. And I can't. It's like I'm too, it's what's given me strength over the years, you know, with that person, is not forgiving them. And I don't even want to know what it would feel like to forgive that person. Which I know sounds really kind of sad, especially as I honestly am jealous of Phyllis having that strength to do that.
Thank you, Yvonne. We, of course, totally understand where you're coming from and why from it. And as you are at peace, some people, though it's been said, anger and hate are an acid that eats away on the inside of the vessel that contains it. So that's also a possibility. It depends on how it impacts you, I guess. Baravan?
Yes, but if Phyllis wanted to comment to what Yvonne was saying, I want to let her go first.
Thank you. I just have a quick comment. Thank you. You know, the great thing about the Forgiveness Project is that there are stories of people and how they define forgiveness. Because, you know, it means it takes many different forms, and well, I'll suffice it to say that. And it's interesting, and also another thing, there's a big difference between forgiving someone you don't have a personal relationship with and someone who you do. So to Yvonne, I would say it's a different kettle of fish, you know? Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Well, Phyllis took what I was going to say. So I was going to say that forgiveness can take different meanings, and I'm really glad that you brought up the personal relationship bit, because immediately what had come to my mind is reconciliation. And I think that that's when if that's a relationship bit, right? Because by forgiving, you're letting go of that toxic energy, and taking on those good principles, as that fellow said, that all religions, right, tell us to abide by. And there has to be a reason, right, that all of us share that in common, and to kind of shed that and bring in the positive. But also, you don't need to reconcile when it comes to the personal type of relationships, because you have your boundaries and you choose how you want to move your path to look moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Baravan. And we have one more person, Bonnie.
Yes, thank you. I guess in the forgiveness, I think of my now ex-husband. When I was married, he said many things, and my friends would be all, you know, that's terrible, that's an awful thing to say, or whatever. But he was telling me what he felt and where he stood on a whole lot of different, whatever stuff was going on. And so I knew exactly where he was, and I knew what I had to deal with. And in leaving that relationship and, you know, forgiving him, he got what he wanted and all. He married again. He has the relationship he wanted. And I got what I wanted. I got freedom. I got out of that. By letting it go and all, then I was able to just move on. And a friend had told me that someone who works in a prison, you know, they're the people there who are the ones who maybe have been convicted or put there, but there are other people too, the ones who are the guards, the ones who are making sure that those prisoners don't get out, they're also in prison. And whether you think of the one someone else said about, anger or whatever it is an acid that eats the person who's got it inside them and all, it's a similar kind of thing that if you can let it go, then you're free. It frees you as well as the other person. And I thank Phyllis for and Orlando for demonstrating that. So.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. One person, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. I'm just listening to this and I'm thinking that, I have good relationships with my two ex-husbands. It doesn't mean to say we still don't have differences and sometimes get annoyed with each other, but, I've been divorced many, many, many years. We're still in contact. We still connect with each other. We still care about each other. And I also have done that with other relationships, boyfriends and other things. And I think what I realized I did at with my first husband, fairly early on, I just set the intention. You set an intention that this is going to be, you're going to transform this relationship into a friendship or whatever it is you want to transform it in. And I'm not saying that this is what everyone should do, because if you've been in a very violent relationship or something, it may be totally appropriate for you to move on. But you have a history together and you have a lot of connections and a lot of things that are really significant in your life. So you can't just negate what has been. You have to honor the past and then move on. And to do that, I found that just setting the intention that this is what we're going to do, this is the way we're going to do it. And it works out every single time for me that I've done that, it has worked out.
Thank you, Mary, for such wonderful advice. And now over to Ivan.
Thanks, Donna. The next question here is a quote from Orlando Rodriguez. I see people like my son who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, dying in other lands. Where and why are such people dying right now? Anybody want to tackle that one?
I think Phyllis does. Well. Phyllis, do you want to tackle this one? Because I see you nodding.
Go ahead, Phyllis. I don't see your hand, but if you want to try it.
Well, it's such a hot potato that
yes,
that I don't want to say what's probably on everyone's mind.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, and it's not just in one part of the world.
Yeah. I think we should skip, actually. So, Molly, how about, are you still around?
I am. I just had my phone die briefly. That was my internet, but I got internet back.
Okay.
So wanted to check in and just kind of relate this to national policy. And what I kind of see, I'll share that I have a personal interest in this because I have a dream of building an organization that would work towards creating more empathic policy by the way that it works with congressional members. But specifically, we want to focus on the ways that we saw people in this movie building empathy with each other. And at a very holistic, very high level, I'm going to ask the following question. And people take a moment to think, because this is not a small question. It's kind of a huge question here. How can building empathy in times of national tragedy be a tool toward building better policy in response to that tragedy? So what are the ways in which building empathy can actually be used towards better policy? And I will say that this comes from seeing, very much the opposite of empathetic policies often instituted nationally, locally, statewide, etc., And what would it look like if empathy was built more into policymaking? Huge question. I'm going to let it sit. Oh, maybe not. Lori, you are a brave soul. Go for it.
I just think in thinking about empathy, especially with policy, is you have to recognize that a policy affects people. And I think the more experiences we have with people who especially are different than we are, it helps to build that empathy. So then when you go in and you're making policy, you know, you've heard a story about somebody in a situation that the policy is going to directly affect. That changes it. It's not just a policy anymore, it's a person behind that policy and something that's going to really make an impact in their lives. There's so many laws and policies that are set that do not affect the people who are setting them hardly at all. They're affecting everyone else. So I think, you know, especially as a lawmaker, taking time to understand who your policy is affecting and getting to know people in those areas. You know, if you're going to make a policy about immigration, you better know something about immigrants. You better have contact with immigrants. You better know people who are immigrants and know their stories. Or, you know, a policy on abortion or anything. I just think making decisions when you have no connection whatsoever to a person that policy is going to affect is problematic. So I think trying to really learn about people who are different and feel empathy for them and their stories is really important.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you. Patty, give us another of your thoughts.
Just a quick thought is that building some level of empathy in a time of crisis takes away some of the reactivity, and that automatically, to me, leads to better policy because you can be more thoughtful. If you're just reacting in a crisis, it's sort of like empathy is an antidote for, you know, it's like taking a deep breath. It's like taking time to understand the situation and the people affected, you know, whatever the given crisis is. If anything that helps to limit just knee-jerk responses or anger or reactivity is a big plus. And I hope that you can create your organization.
Thank you. I'm getting a lot of great feedback on it, so I'm excited for that. I will also put out there, like, I think some people have alluded to this idea, and I'm going to add to it that, like, imagine when I talk about, or when we talk about, you know, having more empathy, imagine what it would look like, for example, if homeless people were involved with every time policy was written that affected the homeless. Like if they were co-writing with members of Congress in their offices. That's kind of like what I'm, that's a very, very tiny part of what I'm alluding to, but that's just to plant that idea. I wish I knew how to pronounce your name, but Baravan? How do I say it?
You can call me Barry. It's Baravan.
But it's such a beautiful name. I want to say it properly. Baravan. Okay.
Baravan. So I love this question because for me, it really elucidates the influence of media, because I feel like even in our current climate, those two are almost working hand in hand together. And then Randy had mentioned the Reduce the Rancor initiative that they had going in Minnesota, and that really resonated with me too, because how much of the language we use in the way we speak with one another, to one another and about things, I think is really influenced by media. And then that also works hand in hand with policy.
I think I'm not quite understanding what you meant by media. Can you clarify a little bit there?
Yeah, so, okay, building better policy in response to this tragedy, like, okay, even if we think about like abortion initiatives, right? Like I feel that when policymakers are taking into consideration the paths that are being pursued, right? They're obviously taking a temperature of the populace, right? Like their constituents. And I feel like their constituents are often swayed by the media and social media, and how much of that social media is towards divisiveness versus not towards empathy and finding common ground? I hope that's like a better answer.
No, it's some huge questions to tackle in a short time.
Okay.
So yeah, no, you did a good job. Bill, go for it. And then Haya and Randy, and they'll close us out on this.
So you've got a tall mountain to climb here. So empathy is an emotional thing. Policy is a rational thing. So the two don't necessarily mesh very well. Also, as we know from Machiavelli, people who are in power are resistant to change. So there's going to be pushback when you try to implement policies to deal with.
Bill, you don't even know what the idea is yet, and you're already saying why it
No,
won't
but there will be pushback. I mean, Machiavelli tells us that there will be pushback. Those in power always resist those who try to do anything that might erode their power. However, where I'm leading up to with this is, I've got a Quaker background, and there's an organization called Friends Committee for National Legislation, otherwise known as FCNL. So my recommendation to you would be to model yourself after existing organizations that are successful at doing this. So FCNL, for example, reaches out to every Quaker in the world or in the United States to figure out what's the right thing to do, and then they lobby for it like crazy. They've got an office in Washington, D.C., and they lobby like crazy. So I'm not saying that you need to be another FCNL, but what I am saying is that you should find some models that you can model yourself after who are doing this successfully already.
Totally. And don't worry, I have found two already that are doing
Good.
similar.
You're going to tell us what they are?
No, but we can talk privately because the question's more about the related to more broader policies. So.
Okay.
Kaya, go for it.
I'm taking advantage of the opportunity really to ask one small question from Phyllis. Did you actually meet with Moussaoui? Did you speak with him?
No. It wouldn't be allowed, but I did see him in the flesh in the courtroom for about an hour one day. No, I'm not allowed to, it wasn't possible. Orlando really wanted to, but it wasn't possible.
Okay. I just was curious because I was trying to figure out where the sympathy came from. If you didn't meet him and you didn't speak with him, so where is the sympathy coming from, other than through the empathy for the mother?
Well, when I learn about things that are done by people I don't know, or who victimize others, or who are victimized, I mean, sympathy I feel sympathy because we don't know. Well, let me try to frame it. I'm losing my train of thought. I don't think you have to meet someone to have sympathy for them. That's what I'm trying to say. And I have sympathy for him. Well, let's say that he was guilty of everything that he was accused of. He didn't know what the consequences would be. That happens to a lot of us and a lot of people.
He pleaded guilty.
Sorry?
He pleaded guilty and then convicted.
No, he was not convicted.
He was convicted. You can choose. I'm an attorney. Trust me, you can choose. You can check the facts.
He was
convicted by the judge after pleading guilty. And then when he did not get life, he got life. When he did not get the death penalty, he said, America lost. Check.
The prosecution influenced him a lot. And he was sure that George Bush wanted to execute him. You know, he had this feeling that he was destined to die.
How do you
And
know?
they told him that if he pleaded guilty, he would be treated better. That while waiting for execution, he would be in a nice, comfy cell.
In other words, you do not believe that he did anything, you know,
That's aside from the point.
intentionally? No, I'm interested how you think. Forget, you know, what really happened, because we don't know, right? We are not in his body. I'm asking what you think. You think that he was railroaded? That he was not really guilty?
I don't think that's what she said at all.
I wonder what she has to say about it. I'm curious.
Well, I'm telling you, the consequences of his actions, whether they had to do with 9/11 or not, because he did admit to wanting to fly a plane into the White House. He did not know the consequences of it. Maybe he thought, because, you know, a lot of these hijackers were led to believe that they would be martyrs and that they would have a wonderful time in heaven, you know, for sacrificing themselves for the cause. And maybe he thought he'll fly a plane into the White House and he'll be killed and he'll go to heaven and he'll be happy the rest of his, you know, heavenly existence. But this is going in circles, and you know, if we would ever be able to talk in person and without, you know, 20 other people wanting to express themselves or get on with the program.
I think I'm gonna, yeah, thank you, Phyllis. I think I'm gonna refocus on the last question, which was actually about empathy and policy. And you two, we can definitely put you in touch after if you'd like. So Randy, why don't you close us out with the last question? I gotta unmute yourself. There
Just
you go.
muted myself. I
Okay.
think empathy can be useful toward a better policy if that policy isn't going to hurt your country. I think it's sort of like, I'm not going to have empathy if I'm walking down the street and I see somebody walking toward me with a gun. I need to survive, so I won't use empathy at that moment. So I really think it depends upon the circumstances. I think there are times when having empathy could help with good policy, and there are times when it's a matter of protection, immediate protection. So that's my thought as we finish up.
All right. We didn't get to all the questions, as we, you know, just can't always do, but I do want to leave people with this to think about, since we're just over time now by a couple minutes, which is how taking action, you know, being, I guess, what's the word, proactive, taking action frees one from victimhood and fear, because I think that's actually a lot of what was happening in the film. Just something to leave you with, to think about. But we are going to close, as always, just a few minutes over, with a little overview of Braver Angels, a brief one. We're also going to introduce the next film and the date for that discussion. So turning it over to my co-conspirators.
Thank you, Ma. So Abraham Lincoln said, "We are but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory swell the chorus of the union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angel of nature." With Abraham Lincoln, we work to build a house united, and we, by bringing people who disagree with each other on certain things. We never ask people to change about the issues, but we do ask people to change their mind. And so we have workshops, we have debates, we have events such as this one to give people that opportunity. So we ask, if you agree with our cause and you're not a member yet, to please become a member. We'll put that in the chat box, how you do that. And Ivan is now going to introduce the next selection for April?
Yes, thank you. The next film that we'll discuss next month is called Forum with Malice Toward None with Charity for All, Reclaiming Civility in American Politics. It's a recording of a discussion held in the National Cathedral recently, I think last month. And it really deals with how to talk to someone with differing beliefs in a civil way. It features Republican Governor Spencer Cox of Utah, Democratic Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, TV commentator Donna Brazile, and others. It's free and available on YouTube. And some of the ideas that they discuss is why bipartisanship is important even when it's not necessary. Another one is about how youth service programs can develop better citizens. And finally, to understand somebody with differing beliefs, start with understanding how your own beliefs formed and how your prior beliefs were challenged. So I encourage everybody to look for that in our webpage for the coming movie to be discussed, and it'll have the links and registration information then. Hope to see you for next month. And I guess that's all.